Welcome to the Powercat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Now let's go to the rolling Flint Hills, home of the Cats and Dogs studio. Here's your host, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome to another edition of the Powercat Podcast, Fitz and Coles and Gills. Cole, good to have you back.
Thank you. I didn't say this before we started recruiting, but not recruiting. That tells you where my mind's at. Recording. I miss you guys. It's weird not seeing you guys on a regular basis. And so I miss you, and I miss giving Ryan a bunch of tough love, but I get to see that over StreamYard, which is amazing. But I'm very happy to be here finally.
Even when you're not here, though, I mean, Fitz still bullies me. So
that's true.
I mean, even Big B was saying that he rarely agrees with things I say. So I can't catch a break on this show, no matter who's on.
Yeah, but look what I can do. Okay. Well, it's now down to Cole and I brought him back.
Man, I knew that was coming. I saw that coming from a mile away.
This is the podcast in which our subscribers at Go Powercat, Wabash Station, most specifically, that's our message board. They get to ask the questions. Everyone gets to hear our answers. It's the Powercat Questions podcast, sponsored by the Fridge Wholesale Liquor. Let's hope they continue. We'll see. We're in negotiations, deep, heated negotiations. They've asked me to stop drinking all of their products. They would like to sell some to other people. It's all about them. Anyhow, we got some great questions, I assume. And Ryan Gilbert's going to read those questions. Now, read questions, Ryan Gilbert.
Okay.
One from Wabash Station.
First question is from KSU number 1. Does the new offensive coordinator air it out in the first game or keep it on the ground?
Ooh, I think he'll be pretty conservative. He'll show what he needs to show. You know, he's not going to put a bunch of stuff out there. He's got to save some of that, but also they can't get into the ultra conservative. I think it's important for this team with all the young players to really build some confidence and belief in what they're doing. And honestly, an in-game belief in Avery. They have full faith in him every other place as a leader of this team, but to see him rocking it in a game, I think would be really good for the offense, the psyche of the team. So yeah, I don't think he'll necessarily air it out immediately. I think he'll try to do it some, but I think early on, you're going to see DJ Giddens carry the ball and try to establish that offensive line. Because remember, the offensive line is coached by the offensive coordinator, and he knows he's got a new bunch, and I think he'll try to establish them early.
I think, guys, there's no time to hold anything back. Immediately out of the gate, week 2, you are just kind of thrown into the fire because we know they are not going to have a repeat performance of that Tulane game a few seasons ago. And I think in the beginning part of the year, every year under Chris Klieman, we've asked the same question, how conservative will the offensive coordinator, rather it be Cordy Messingham or Colin Klein, be? And every year it's been extremely conservative. And I think that goes back for a number of reasons, right? With Messingham, he was just an old school coach. There's nothing wrong with being an old school coach, but he came from the Bill Snyder tree of we're not going to show our cards unless we actually have to. And obviously Colin Klein came from the Bill Snyder, we're not going to show our cards unless we have to. I think that's completely out of question with these guys and Matt Wells and Connor Riley, because they have to see what works. It's a bunch of new guys on offense. They think they're talented, but they got to see what works. And, UT Martin is no pushover. This is not going to be a game where they can just flip a coin, and if it lands on heads, you're going to score 70 points. And if it lands on tails, you're going to score 50. It doesn't work like that. So they're going to have to see what works, and they're not going to put it this way. Will they keep some plays? Sure. But they're going to do what they need to do to win the game and see how they can become a better unit moving forward.
Yeah, Cole, you mentioned Tulane and obviously Arizona coming up the week after that. Those are not easy opponents. So if something is not going to work out, you need to figure that out immediately in week number 1. Yeah, you can probably get away with a win with some mistakes, but if you hold some stuff close to the vest and it doesn't come out until Tulane, and that jet sweep, reverse, whatever doesn't work, you're going to have a problem, right? You're going to have a much harder time recovering from that. But as Fitz kind of mentioned at the beginning of the answer, yes, at the end of the day, you don't want to show off everything, but the schedule gets tough real quick. And so there's a fine balance. And I'm sure these are conversations that, that K-State coaching staff, Wells, Riley, Kleiman, all those guys have, this is not, they've talked about this, right? How much do we want to show off? But you can't show everything. You also have to show something, though. You can't just go out and run ice up the middle 40 plays a game with Edwards and Giddens.
Well, we talk about K-State's schedule and need to be ramped up for Tulane. Let's look at Tennessee Martin's schedule. I am told SEMO is their rival, and that's who they play the next week on the road. So they open with 2 road games. So what will be the psyche of that team, how the coaches prepare for it? Are they just going to go for it and have a lot of wild plays? Or are they just going to try to be very vanilla themselves and maybe not try to get guys hurt? I don't know. I don't know how they'll approach it. Being one of those schools, this game is about the payday more than the victory. That's just the reality of the budgets at that level. If they can get the victory, they certainly want it, but I don't think they want to get the victory at the cost of losing to their rivals either. So there's going to be some interesting approaches by the coaches here on how they put their product on the field and what they show, what they don't. And, honestly, how invested are they in this game, or are they peeking down the road to a rivalry game?
Fitz, I want to ask you this question because this just feels like a strange season in the sense that it feels like immediately out of the jump, like the season's here. And I know every year during football season, it's like, okay, week 1's here. And then it's like the family reunion, right? That's what, those 6:00 games are. It's the family reunion, like they like to call it. It just feels like, okay, after that game, there's no break. And maybe you look at like week 9 or 10 down the road, you're playing, but that's still Big 12 games. And if you're in the hunt where you think you're going to be, those games are going to have meaning. But when was the last time? You've been around this program a long time. When was the last time that K-State had just felt like, okay, week 1, we're immediately jumping into the season, and it feels like every game is massively important?
I agree. I think they know what's at stake here, and maybe even further, I think Coach Kleiman understands the historical importance of this season heading into the new Big 12, and trying to establish an alpha relationship with the conference is probably on their mind. Assert themselves early, but they can't mess around. You go to Tulane, you come back home and play a huge game with Arizona, and then you go on the road, play BYU, and boom, you're back home to play Oklahoma State before you have a week off. That's a flurry of action. So I think kind of settling in and getting that offense running, I think is really important against Tennessee Martin, maybe more so than hiding a bunch of stuff that, they probably know you're going to run anyhow, unless it's completely new stuff with Dylan Edwards. That I can see them hiding, but your other plays that you've run, no, they're gonna use it. They'll put it all out there. They're not going to mess around. And you know what? If you're K-State, you want to get away and get other guys on the field because of this schedule. There aren't many of those games early in the year where you can probably clear out the bench a little bit and get some guys experience, particularly those freshmen that might want to use one of their 4 games here. So there's a lot of off the field elements that are going to go into this game.
Fitz, I will just say you would make a great politician because I asked you a question and you didn't answer it.
Thank you, Roger.
What
was the question?
Just like, when was the last time that it felt
I don't know.
I would say 2022 to answer, but we didn't think Tulane was going to be worth a dang, and they ended up winning the Cotton Bowl. We thought Missouri might be pretty good, and they weren't very good, but I don't know. I can't remember a season. It's just a weird structured season.
Probably have to go back to 98. We knew coming off of 97 that team was special, and they really found themselves and the momentum as that season went on. So we knew in 98 it was a big year. And so it probably has to be that, because look, we didn't expect what happened in 2003. It, particularly when it kind of came off the tracks early in the season with injuries. In 2012, I think we knew the team would be good, but they were really good. And I don't think we were quite this stoked for it. What's interesting about this is really the only time that you've entered a season with this kind of feeling of maybe this is a titled season, but with a new quarterback. That's what's so unique about it. A guy that really is mostly unproven. And we're going off a couple games and a bunch of word of mouth from the people that do see practice, including coaches and players who all swear it's real and tangible. So I think the fans are itching to see that.
One more thing I'll add with the offense and Wells, since we've been talking about that, the plays, what are we going to see in week one, stuff like that. Wells mentioned on Monday in the press conferences that when he got to Manhattan, there was not a whole lot that he needed to do. Like he loved K-State's offense. He was complimentary of it. Obviously, there's going to maybe be some flavors that he adds to that offense, but you got to remember Connor Riley's still there, Kleiman's still there, right? So don't expect it just because there's a new offensive coordinator to look a whole lot different. It might look different, but that's because of the weapons, the explosive playmakers that are on that side of the football rather than the coordinator or co-coordinator.
I think we're going to see a bunch of option read. I'll be honest. I think that's going to be one of his things. He's going to try to put the defense in conflict to decide who's got the ball, who's taking the ball. And we know this also. We saw some of the shovel pass being practiced in one of the open sessions, which is something K-State hasn't typically done, but Matt Wells has. So that's always been a play. I've wondered why K-State doesn't pick up on it, particularly if you got a guy as fast as some of the people on the edge have been. But they haven't done it, and I think they'll get to it. And I just want to see what other layers, what other wrinkles Matt Wells puts into this offense.
Next questions from Eshin Tex. How long will Coach Wells be here? Over under 2.5 seasons.
That's a long time in any kind of college sports cycle, especially for an assistant coach. I mean, how many players are on the roster for over 2.5 years? You know what I mean? I want to hear your answer first, Fitz, because I don't know yet.
I guess if I had to actually bet under that, I think maybe 2 years will be it. I mean, let's look at it from the perspective of what we expect to happen. We expect Avery Johnson to be very good. We know he's going to be around a second year or third year overall. We expect that to be at K-State. So that's 2 full seasons of Avery Johnson. And you know who's going to look really brilliant? His coach. So I can see this growing into, particularly if K-State, let's say, wins back-to-back titles. I see this could be a catapult to a number of these guys maybe being head coaches, but certainly Matt Wells again, because I think all of us look back at what happened at Tech and kind of feel like they pulled the plug too soon. And I imagine other people kind of feel that about him after the success at Utah State. So I won't be surprised if he ends up back in coaching as a head coach, and it's going to play out nicely with him if it's as successful these next 2 years as everyone hopes.
And I think it's a desire. Does he want to be a head coach again?
That's a good point.
I mean, in today's cycle of college football, he would be, I'm sure he's tempted to, you know what? I got a good thing going at K-State. Like you said, if things go how a lot of us think that they might over the next 2 years, and K-State has a good thing going, maybe he just decides, you know what? I like this place. I'm not going to leave. And that's a realistic possibility too. So I could see a world, and honestly, I probably lean over. I really believe that. I mean, who's to say that he doesn't want to try it again with the Blake Barnett, that he doesn't want to try it again with the Dylan Duff, or a quarterback to be named later that might come in that he's really confident with. So, I mean, there's a good chance that I think he stays over. I know I said all the reasons why to take the under in the very beginning before I listened to you, but I think there's a realistic chance he's here longer. And if he's not here, Fitz, it also wouldn't surprise me. He strikes me as a guy who might want to dip his toe into the NFL waters and go try and be a quarterback coach somewhere. That's also a realistic possibility too.
Could be.
You guys look at Texas Tech, right? If Matt Wells genuinely was just awful and it was a terrible hire and he stunk and he deserved to get fired, then Matt Wells might take a look in the mirror and say, yeah, I may not be fit to be a leader of a whole team. I might just be better off as a coordinator. But most of us can agree, right, that Matt Wells, they pulled the plug too early there. He was not a terrible head coach. Most people think that he deserved more time. It was kind of not a shocking move, but it was Texas Tech definitely just jumped the gun too early on that one. So I think Matt Wells probably feels like he has more left in the tank, more to prove as a head coach leading a football team. That's not to put words into Matt Wells' mouth or anything, but yeah, what Cole said could be true as well. Not everyone's meant to be a head coach. Maybe he'll love this role at Kansas State. But 2.5 years, or 2.5 seasons over under that is, that's a long time. That's an eternity in college football. So we'll see what happens. I see sides to both sides of that. But as long as Matt Wells is a coach in Manhattan, he's a valuable asset to this program.
Yep.
Very well said.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question is from Colorado. Can you have a frank discussion about Avery and unrealistic fan expectations? This time next year, it may be fair for fans to talk about him and the Heisman, All-Conference, All-American, etc., but he has only started 2 games. Won't he need a year to grow into his potential?
Okay, here's a frank answer. Vince, why is Frank Martin on this podcast?
If you don't understand that reference, you haven't been around long enough.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I don't think it's the fans that have built this. I think they're just taking cues from the players and coaches. I mean, how would the fans know really what's going on outside of the few flashes we've seen? But it's to a man, to every coach, and they'll tell you that he's going to make mistakes. It's part of the growing process. But what they see behind the scenes is it's a natural leader, a guy that knows how to handle the stress of being the quarterback and the responsibilities of being a leader and a quarterback. And he just is advanced for his age in terms of his mental preparation and his ability to lead. So, I think that there are an element of fans that expect him to throw for 3,000 yards, run for 2,000 yards, and fly for another 1,000. But he is human, so he won't be flying. But he will put up some pretty good numbers. But contrary to some beliefs, he doesn't have to be the hero either. He might be the hero, but he's got some pretty damn good tools around him. And I think that also fuels the optimism. This isn't just about putting it all on the shoulders of a sophomore starting quarterback. We know he's got a really good running back. He's got elements of a good line. We've seen Jace Brown and others have their moments in this offense. So I think we all feel like with Dylan Edwards there's tools around him that will make life much easier for a sophomore quarterback.
And let's think about it like this. Fitz, again, I pose a question to you, mainly because I don't know this. And Gilbert, you might know this. But when was the last time a second-year player was a captain at K-State?
I think BJ Finney was.
BJ Finney.
I think. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure BJ just dove right in. BJ was a walk-on. They immediately knew he wasn't a walk-on. They needed a scholarship. And I remember talking to people heading into his redshirt freshman year. Who's going to be the starting center? Oh, that's BJ Finney. The walk-on? Yeah. Oh, it's BJ Finney. And I think he was a captain. I don't know. But, yeah, it is rare.
I mean, so
rare, particularly for a guy who wasn't the starter in his first year.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be something that hasn't happened very often at K-State. And to me, when I saw that, I mean, I had an idea that was coming. I thought that maybe that he wouldn't be named a captain. He would just, kind of be a, de facto captain, a leader. But the fact that he was named a captain, to me, just tell me everything I need to know. I mean, that's what they feel about the guy. If you don't think that this team believes, that this program believes that Avery Johnson is capable of having those expectations, just go look at the captains list, because it is all seniors and then Avery Johnson. And there are plenty of other guys who they've talked about that, hypothetically, Jacob Parrish, I think, could have been a captain on this team.
Yep.
VJ Payne, we know Marquis Siegel is, but VJ Payne could have been a captain on this team. And instead, they chose their sophomore quarterback. And that should tell you everything you need to know about how this team feels about that guy. Like, the frank discussion is everything that everyone is saying, I think, is realistic expectations. Like, not saying that it's going to happen, but don't be surprised if it does. Like, nobody is going to be surprised if Avery Johnson is a first-team All Big 12 quarterback this year. Like, nobody's going to be surprised. Nobody in that building, nobody that covers this team. I don't think any fan's going to be surprised by that. I honestly would be more surprised if Avery Johnson is mediocre than if he ends the season in New York at the Heisman Trophy ceremony. And I know that's probably saying a lot, but that's just kind of what it feels like with what they're saying.
Good answer.
My answer is just you guys kind of touched on it. Like, don't take our word for it as the analysts or whatever you want to call ourselves. Like, listen to the coaches, listen to the players, listen to what Ryan Wallace has said over the years, who knows every high school coach in the state of Kansas and beyond. Like, everybody just has such good things to say about him. You mentioned it, Cole, as a captain, right? And he's just got kind of that it factor that maybe that might be a little opinionated to say, but he's just look at him, right? Look at how he plays, how he carries himself. Obviously, at what we've heard about him, as a leader in that locker room. So that's just kind of how I'd answer the question. Don't take our word for it. Just look around you. There's been so much said about Johnson, and I get it. There hasn't necessarily been a ton proven on the field, but what he played, what he's done on the field has been awesome, right? It's only been a few games. Sure, I get that, but it's not like Johnson doesn't really have any bad tape out there. I mean, there's been a few plays, sure, that were obvious, early on last year, obvious design runs that a fourth grade defensive concept could have, figured out what was going on, right? But later on in the year, once they kind of gave him the keys to cut it loose and play some real football, we saw what Avery Johnson's capable of.
And I think too, guys, I mean, the reason why I think he can be so good and he will be so good, honestly, has very little to do with his abilities on the field. It mostly has his abilities off the field. He has this certain, I know young folks like to say aura, right? He has this certain aura about him where he walks into a room and he's 19 years old, but immediately when he walks into the room, you're like, oh, that's the guy. Like, that's the guy who knows what's going on. And the way he leads, he's stone cold, man. Like, there's no shaking this kid. And he just has that ability to walk into a room, command the presence, be mature. He sounds like an NFL quarterback when you talk to him in the media. Mm-hmm. He's different than any other quarterback that, I've covered, and I've covered 4 or 5 quarterbacks now, in the sense that he just seems like he has an answer for every single question. He's in control. And if he's like that in the media, imagine what he's like in the huddle. And from his actions off the field, it just tells you that this guy has it figured out at a very early age.
I always go back to this story. One of the 24/7 national recruiting analysts shared this with us, that at the Elite 11, we're talking about all the best quarterbacks in the country are at this thing a couple years ago, and some of the top receivers are there to, so they can throw to them and have interaction with them. That when they all got on the bus at the end of the day, people gravitated around Avery. It was like Avery was holding court every evening before the bus would roll back to the hotels. And there's just this natural gravity that people have towards him in terms of being a leader of football players. So I know it's easy to say, hey, he's a sophomore, and I'm, like I've said again and again, he's going to make mistakes. We're not saying he's going to be perfect, because there's no way. But this isn't your typical kid. It isn't. And that's another reason why I want this to get started, because I really want people to see how this young man operates as a leader, because it's kind of unique.
Mm-hmm.
Last question of the first half is from KSU Man. Realistic expectations for the offense this year, same for the defense. I'm glad, guys. We have one more week until game week, and we can finally start to break stuff down.
All these rules and expectations, I feel like I'm giving a syllabus on the first day of class all over again. I don't know. It's hard to say. I guess really what this question boils down to is, who do you think is going to have the better year, the offense or the defense, right?
Well, also, are we being asked to judge K-State's offense or defense to the other Big 12 teams that we haven't seen play?
Right.
I think the offense will be, as long as Avery stays healthy and his playmakers stay healthy, I think the offense will be one of the best in the nation. I really do. I think it has that potential. Certainly will be one of the best in the Big 12, but I think people will quickly realize that they can put up pretty big numbers. And I've said this on a daily delivery. I think the defense has potential to be better than the offense. We're all so hung up on Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards and DJ Giddens and the receivers, and we kind of are looking past a defense that has really sound players and exciting newcomers that really could make a difference. I'm not hiding this. I'm always a little bit optimistic, but this could be one of the elite teams in K-State football history, unless something unravels it, like injuries, or they just get some horrific breaks and it just doesn't work out. But this team has so much potential. Again, that, like Gilbert said, let's get to the game. We got one more of these before a game, and we're going to get more questions like this. But I want a game. I demand a game. In fact, let's call up Tennessee Martin. We're going to play next weekend. We're just going to move it up. Everyone just show up at the Bill.
You can play the Olathe North freshmen. I know we're looking for a game on this weekend.
I think that might be a mismatch.
Yeah,
I'm just saying. I think Avery would probably put up some pretty big numbers.
I'm going to answer this question. I expect the defense to be better than. How about this? I expect the defense to tackle better than last year.
Mm-hmm.
I expect the defense to create more turnovers than last year. I expect the defense to be deeper than last year. And I expect the defense to have an overall better scoring defense. Did that answer the question for the defensive side of the ball?
Yes.
That was good.
Okay. Offensively, I expect the offense to be more explosive. I think they'll average more plays. I think they will have more big plays. And I think they will score more points than they did last year. Does that fully answer the question?
Yes.
Works for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's really, I think they're going to be a better football team. They're going to be better than they were last year. So therefore, the offense and the defense both have to be better than they were last year. That's really what it comes down to.
And let's be honest, I think special teams would be better, because if it's worse, I'm going to jump out of the press box. I don't even know if the window's open, so it's going to be a challenge.
I'm sure Lackey can help you out with that. He's got his stick.
The upper window's open, and we learned the last game we covered at the Bill that it's okay to get on the tables. So
that's very true.
Yeah,
jump up and down.
We did learn that.
Good thing.
Real quick here.
Go ahead, Gilbert.
Before you go to break, I think it's very comforting. K-State's defense is the floor for that group is very high. Especially when you look at the depth from top to bottom, all those positions. Like K-State's defense, Cole, maybe they don't have a better, scoring, points per game or turnovers, whatever, yardage. Maybe that might not be better statistically, but I don't see K-State's defense really being a big reason that they lose these games. They may not take over the games, but there's just so many solid pieces on that side of the ball. With offense, with a player like Avery Johnson, he is going to make mistakes. And so we talk about those unrealistic expectations. Maybe fans need to get just understand that with a young quarterback that has some moxie, some swagger to him, he's gonna maybe try to make a play that might not be there. And so that's okay. Obviously, you're gonna have those highlight plays, but with those risks you take, there's gonna be some mistakes. And one more thing with the wide receivers, I know Big B touched on this in last week's episode. There's a lot of hype around that group, and rightfully so. I'm buying into it. I think we all are, but we haven't seen really a good amount of wide receiver success at Kansas State since Chris Klieman took over. There's been some good players, but the depth at wide receiver has not been, and it happens not every year, but it seems more often than not, there's a lot of momentum in that wide receiver room heading into the year. And oftentimes it just hasn't panned out yet. So a couple things there to keep in mind, but by and large, I think both offensively and defensively, there's no reason to believe that this group, this team can't be better compared to last year.
Well, I think you did a good job of giving me my new rap name, Swagger Moxie.
Yes, I was going to say, I like that word.
That's what Avery Johnson's haircut's named after, actually.
It's going to be my rap name as I get into that as a career. I'm sure I'll be big. I am big. Anyhow, we're going to go to break now, and we're all going to enjoy some Fridge Wholesale Liquor during the break. We're going to have a sip or two. No, we're not. What am I saying? We're not drinking on the air. Come back on the other side. We'll be stone sober, talking about going to the fridge, but we don't do that during the show. Gilbert will be back. That'll bring back a couple viewers.
That'll make you want to drink.
I'm going to just drink my hint flavored water like a real man.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Please visit The Fridge Wholesale Liquor, located at the corner of Claflin and Westport Road in Manhattan, Kansas.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to the Cats and Dogs studio.
Welcome back to the Powercat Podcast, the second to last episode before kickoff. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
We've got one more. Like, look at next week is the season finale of the off season. I don't know. I'm kind of lost in the weeds here, but I'm going to keep going. And then the one after that will be the new season. I don't know. Football's coming is what I'm trying to say. And we're sponsored by The Fridge. It's always alcohol season at The Fridge. There should be an alcohol season, like, from spring break to, I don't know. Anyhow, go to The Fridge. You're going to be in town in 2 weeks, 10 days, right? You can make it to The Fridge. It's a night game. Leave that home booze at home from those lesser liquor stores that you might frequent in your very fine hometown, but they're not The Fridge. And stop in and say hello and get some, make yourself a 6-pack. That's a pretty cool thing. Or get some crowlers, growlers, whatever they are. They fill them with beer. Do that too. And now we're going to answer more of your questions from Wabash Station. What? Oh, go get you some. There we go. There's the tagline.
There you go.
The great tagline that's probably sold them like $1 million worth of booze. Here's more of your questions from Wabash Station. Ryan Gilbert.
First questions from Pickles. It's been mentioned that the older boosters want to get it done in basketball. How long until boosters want to get it done in football?
Well, I think that's there. You always have to remember when we talk about the older boosters, we're probably talking about people older than me or similar age, and it was all basketball. I mean, there's in that generation, there's kind of a undertone of bitterness because when the two teams met in '88 in Pontiac, Michigan, K-State was the favorite. And it just feels like at those 2 points, the programs went different directions when they were very comparable at that time. Yeah, KU's got a rich history, Wilt Chamberlain, yeah. But in the context of what college basketball was at that time, these two programs were on par, and Kansas State was, still regarded as a dormant, sleeping giant. That's what these people remember. And now they've had years and years of KU fans stuffing it down their throat because KU has been dominant during the ESPN era of college basketball. And they just want it to end. They're going to do everything they can to help it end. But believe me, some of those same people are invested in football. It's just basketball. You can make a bigger splash.
Yeah.
Because you're only getting 13 players, and they're making a splash right now. If you're following recruiting, and Gills will have plenty of that coming up, Eric Bossie's done some stuff for us. They got some dudes coming in, and it's going to be awfully fun to watch.
I think too, guys, like, not to say that you can win over basketball players easier with NIL than you can football players, but like the football recruiting process compared to the basketball recruiting process is completely different. And I mean, the schools that are winning for the top recruits, I mean, we're talking like, I'm looking at Bryce Underwood, the number 1 player in the country. Like, take Lincoln Cure out of it. I mean, actually, you know what? Honestly, Lincoln Cure is a good example. The kid, for everything that, we've been told, is like NIL was a non-factor in his recruiting process. Mm-hmm. How many kids are like that in football? I would venture to say there's a lot more kids like that in football than there is in basketball, where NIL is not a priority, right? You get paid whatever your value is. Look at Arch Manning, for example. Didn't take a single dollar in NIL. Now, a lot of that is because of the family money, sure, but he was the number 1 recruit in the country. Didn't take a single dollar in NIL until he said, I'm not taking a dollar until I play a snap at Texas. And sure, there are basketball players like that, but in football, there's a lot more guys that are like that than there is basketball. And if Georgia's coming calling with no NIL money, but K-State's coming calling with a lot of NIL money, it really more or less evens the playing field because of the history that Georgia has had in developing top recruits, sending them to the NFL, having success, winning national championships. It's just, it's completely different. Not to say K-State can't do it, because I think they can. If they continue to have success in this new college football playoff, they can compete with some of those teams for recruits. But it's just the recruiting process is completely different.
Yeah. And keep in mind, Chris Kleiman, I think, has cracked the code on how to be successful with the football NIL by spending it in-house, not spending a lot of it on recruits, but making sure the guys in the program that are proven are getting paid what they should be getting paid. So you just approach it in a totally different way. And the unfortunate circumstance means the star running back might be getting less money than the 10th best player on the basketball team. But that's just how the market works out. And it's not exactly fair. But when you're trying to feed 85 mouths over, 13 in basketball, it doesn't, the numbers don't go up exponentially. If you're spending, $4 million on basketball and there's 8 times more players, you're not spending 32 in football. It's not how it works. So that's just a reality of how NIL is working out. I think basketball and football are both using the NIL to their advantage within their ecosystem.
Yes,
they're separate ecosystems. Mm-hmm. They don't follow the same rules. So I think the boosters are invested in both, but right now there's a push to, they feel like with Coach Tang, it's right now. And because in basketball, you can go out and get a few players and make a world of difference. You go out in football, you got to get a bunch of players. You got to have some really special players and some other players that are already there that rise up. It's just much more complex to achieve that in football. So, I think all of us olds would love to see a return to basketball glory, and there's an opportunity here to get that done.
Next questions from R. Randall 3838. Did you see the Ben Sinnott highlight versus the Jets where he had a 44-yard catch and drugged several defenders several yards? I also read that Cooper Beebe is in a good battle for starter in Dallas. My question is, who plays more this year in the NFL, obviously?
Ooh.
I think Beebe will start. I don't think there is. I mean, from everything people are seeing in Dallas, how he'd pick on a safety or linebacker, but it was a college guy. He's doing it to NFL players now. I mean, he's just a battering ram, and it's unbelievable to watch him pancake NFL level players. Sinnott's just special. He really is. He's going to be around in the NFL a very long time, making plays just like that. And again, those weren't dudes. Those were NFL level dudes. They're in training camp too.
In the first quarter, that was not a third quarter play. Ben Sinnott was playing with the 1s and 2s and did that against, the New York Jets starters. Like, this is not a flash in the pan. I mean, I think Cooper, he might not start right out of the gate. I think he'll play and I think he'll start eventually. The NFL is different, right? Because just because a guy's ready to start doesn't mean they're going to start him. If they are not 100,000% sure that everything about Cooper's game is ready to go, then they'll take their chance and say, you'll be our swing man. If somebody gets hurt, you'll go in and kind of do what you did in college, play guard or center, and then we'll slide a guard out to tackle. But I mean, there's a realistic chance he plays week 1. The only reason I say that is because I know against the Rams, which would have been in their first preseason game, I think he was playing in the second half. And then against the Raiders the other night, he was playing in the first half. So he's definitely making his way up the depth chart.
I know this is kind of ironic to say because, BB was at K-State for the extra year. He's older, right? He's got so much experience. But I think Sinnott, I mean, you mentioned it, Cole, like offensive linemen, that's not necessarily typical in the National Football League to go in and start week number 1, the first snap, right? I've seen it time and again with what the Steelers do. I follow them super closely, right? Like, it's not common to see that. Whereas Ben Sinnott, maybe he's not as NFL ready, right? Like, he's younger than BB, absolutely. But at the tight end position, go out and get open. It's just kind of, it's not, I don't want to say it's easier. That's not the right word, but it's just kind of apples and oranges with what you're being asked to do. And you mentioned it, Cole, like if that, that offensive line coach in Dallas, whatever, they're not 1,000% confident in BB, they're still going to go with, they're going to have BB be that swing man or the backup. Whereas I think Ben Sinnott, go out, get open, catch the ball. It's more cut and dry. There's so many more minutia, the moves on the offensive line when you're trying to block. It's just, they're different. It's just different things to look at. So I think Sinnott, I don't want to necessarily say he'll have a better year. I think that's, both of these guys can have amazing years, but I think Sinnott might play a little bit more, especially early on.
Well, the mistakes of a tight end in the NFL are a lot less glaring than the mistakes of an interior lineman.
Yeah.
If you make a mistake in the NFL, you're going to get your quarterback's head ripped off. If you're a tight end, you might let someone around the edge or you drop a ball, but it's not going to be nearly the same thing as letting a guy have a direct pathway to your quarterback. So yeah, I think there's more at stake here for BB, but I'm confident he's up for it. I think the coaches are even kind of blown away about how good he's been and consistent, because he's just a prototypical interior offensive lineman that you would want on your roster. And I think a lot of teams are going to regret not picking him in the second round.
And, you look at where those two organizations are at right now. I mean, the Commanders are obviously in a rebuilding stage. They just have a first-year head coach. They got a rookie quarterback. I think you're more willing to let Sinnott go out there and kind of learn on the fly. Meanwhile, Mike McCarthy, Jerry Jones in Dallas, I mean, if it goes bad this year, the heads might be rolling. So they might decide to go with some experience, but I'm also kind of not indifferent, but I'm also, my judgment is a little clouded considering I see Mr. BB's timeline on Twitter and it just, all I see is amazing things about Cooper. I can't tell if that's reality or if that's just the way Mr. BB wants to paint things. I heard he's a big fan. I don't know. But no, in all seriousness, I'm really excited for Cooper and I'm really excited for Ben because they're both amazing young men and they're going to have amazing NFL careers.
Agreed.
From Oiler Cat 2, what are your thoughts on the expanded scholarship rosters? Is the K-State walk-on tradition ending? It was fun seeing players like Porter and the Weber brothers playing, let alone huge success stories like Jordy Nelson.
I'm not a big fan of this expanded scholarship. I don't understand it. I'm going to be honest. I don't understand it. We're heading into a cycle of college athletics where the financial outlook is very strange. Why are you adding expenses on top of your legal settlements that you're facing? I don't get that. There's a lot of talk in coaching circles that some programs will stay with 85. Others will go to 95 or, it just kind of leaves them open. Maybe you come across some really good players and you're like, well, we don't have to choose now. We got extra scholarships. I don't think it'll end the walk-on program. I don't see those kids necessarily getting scholarships just because there's more. I think you'll see the walk-on program still operate, but their time as a walk-on won't be as long. There's more scholarships to award them with. So I think that's probably where they'll go with it. But, again, you're in the era of the portal too. Maybe you do use this as an opportunity to load up with some really good players. I'm not sure. Every program is going to have to navigate this on their own. But to say I'm a little stunned that they're adding scholarships in football is an understatement. But in the world of the NIL, you're not going to be able to stockpile the players like you were before they went to 85. I mean, the Nebraskas would just take every good player they could get their hands on and bench them. And, they were using like swimming scholarships for offensive linemen and stuff, which they got nailed for. I believe that's a true story. If it's not a true story, I don't care about your feelings. So I just don't see it having the same effect that the Georgias and whatever will stockpile all the talent, because we're already seeing that talent where they're at the second or third depth position in those programs. They hit the portal. So it's a different world. I don't think it'll be as cumbersome and maybe impactful as it was in the past, but I still think walk-ons will exist. They cannot get rid of walk-ons and require you only to have scholarship players. That is not how opportunity should be at the college level. If you want to pay your way and come compete, then you should be able to do that. And I hope that never changes.
I'm going to compare this to maybe a world of college sports that not a lot of our listeners or viewers are aware of, but the NAIA level is a very similar type of policy. Now they don't necessarily have full ride scholarships. They have an allotment of money. And so they can offer as many kids scholarships, right? In air quotes, for those of you who are listening on the podcast, they can offer as many of those that they want as long as they are getting some kind of money. And so I think it kind of reminds me of that situation. The only difference is at these NAIA schools and at these junior colleges who can just offer a spot to as many players as they want, they have JVs where the players can go play and develop. Well, there isn't any of that at the Division I level, obviously. And so I think what's going to happen to these schools that say, hey, here's a scholarship, you can come play at Alabama. Hey, here's a scholarship, you can come play at Michigan. And maybe those kids would have gone to K-State out of high school, but instead they got an opportunity to go play at Michigan, right? You can't blame a kid for choosing the route to go compete at the, I think K-State's going to be at the highest level, but to the team that just won a national championship, right? Well, those kids are going to go there and they're not going to play. And Fitz, you brought it up. What are they going to do? Then they're going to transfer. And then the cycle will continue to repeat where it'll be this revolving door and you won't have those opportunities for walk-ons at some of those schools. So I think if you're K-State, why change what you're doing? Because that depth that your walk-ons have is going to consistently be there. And a kid who comes into your program as a 17-year-old, by the time they're 20 years old and they're a redshirt junior and they're ready to play on special teams, they're ready to contribute on the field. By the time they're a redshirt senior, they might actually play. Those kids are going to be more valuable because there's going to be less of them. And so keeping that walk-on program, and sure, you can give some extra scholarships if you feel like you really like this kid, but keeping your scholarships where they are and not turn it into a revolving door of a program is going to be essential if K-State wants to continue to have success, because that's what this program is built on.
Agreed. Cole, did you know there used to be JV football at this level?
I think I did. I know, because K-State used to play Baker, right? I think I remember seeing that. The K-State JV played Baker and like Fort Riley and like amazing teams like that.
The definition of how bad K-State football was is Ellis Rainsberger got the program on probation because he was playing varsity players under fake names in junior varsity games.
Wow.
Nice.
Your program really sucks if you get put on probation because you cheated in junior varsity games.
That's amazing.
You're so desperate for success. I don't know.
I want to know who they played. We need to somebody go look up the record books, comment on YouTube, tell me K-State's best game as a JV. And I would love to see, maybe there are some former players who watch this podcast who might've been a part of some of the JV games in the 80s. If you were on that team, or anybody who was on that team, let me know, because I would love to talk to them.
Agreed.
K-Ned, I know you're listening, K-Ned. This is a perfect assignment for you, my man.
Yeah.
Yep.
Last question comes from Ghost Day Kate. How important will it be for Big 12 teams to not just make the playoffs, but compete against the Big 10 and SEC? Does a Big 12 team need to win a natty in the next 5 years to keep the conference relevant?
I don't know that a natty is necessarily required. It would do it, no doubt. But I mean, we thought getting to the national championship would alleviate some of that, and then TCU just got smoked. And now people use that against the Big 12. I'm like, hold on, the conference got someone into the national championship. They weren't awarded that spot. They earned it on the field by beating Michigan. What are you talking about? So, just having success. I heard a really interesting theory from a national perspective that Kansas State is one of the few programs in the Big 12 that might be able to get a bid outside of winning the conference championship. Utah probably is another one. I would imagine Oklahoma State's in that mix. But that, if you're I don't want to say Kansas, Iowa State, and you're 10-2, and you don't play in the championship game, you probably should be in the playoff, but you might not make the playoff because it's going to be so SEC and Big Ten heavy. But yeah, I think when the Big 12 does get a team in, they need to go win that game, particularly if you're like the 3rd or 4th seed, because of the way the bracket works out. The 4 conference champions get buys. You better beat that team that advances to play you. You better get that done because that one will sting because that'll be a lower seed.
Fitz, you know how you said that there's no drinking on this podcast?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you just said Iowa State and 10 wins in the same sentence. I think you broke your rule.
Yeah.
It's been a weird day.
John Kurtz would be very proud of you, Cole. That was a good one.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's been a weird day. Yes, I did. I apologize for historical accuracy. Iowa State won't win double-digit games.
I think that's a great way. I think that's a great way to end it.
Okay. Well, so I pissed off Nebraska and Iowa State fans today. KU, I'll talk about you next week. I don't know. That's it for this edition of the Powercat Podcast, sponsored by Fridge Wholesale Liquor. Thank you very much for listening or watching, or now with the Braille edition that Gilbert's got this little hammer and nail thing. He makes everything in Braille now, so you can read the entire transcript. You need to get to work on that, Gilbert. That's it for this week's show. One more before the season. The season's almost here. You have one free Saturday before football season here. And in fact, this week is week 0, which is weird. Someone asked, why isn't it week 1? And then next week 2? Because everyone starts on week 1. Week 0 is for the specials peoples, like K-State next year against that team already pissed off. That's it. We're done. Thank you very much. Here's the ending.
This has been a GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.